The windmill creaked in the pre-dawn stillness, same rhythm it had kept for 18 years. Silas Drummond stood beneath it, wiping grit from his eyes, when the sound of hooves broke the quiet. 3 horses. Sheriff's badge caught the first light. Horace Caldwell dismounted smooth, like a man who'd practiced. He unfurled a document while the sheriff and his deputy flanked Silas's cabin door. Neighbors appeared on the road, watching. "Resurvey of 1883, Caldwell said, handing it over. "Places your well in North Pasture on railroad land grant parcel 447B. The words blurred. Silas's father had homesteaded this ground in 1867. His hands shook as he held the yellow deed that suddenly meant nothing. The sheriff hammered the notice into the door. Metal on wood. Final. 30 days, Drummond, Caldwell said. Then this land's mine. Legal. Silas turned toward the well, needing water for his dry throat. Something glinted in the bucket, brass with strange markings. A hand, dark and massive, reached up from the shadows below. A woman's voice rasped from the depth. Water. Enter I die. Silas leaned over the well's stone rim. The woman stared up at him with eyes that held no fear, only the hard edge of someone deciding whether to live or die. Can you climb? He asked. No. Her voice carried an accent he'd heard before. Apache, though her English was clear. She was tall, maybe 6 feet, her frame gaunt from days without food. Dust covered her dark skin like a second hide. He lowered the bucket on its rope. Grab hold. She did. The rope groaned under her weight, and Silas's shoulders burned as he hauled her up hand over hand. When she cleared the rim, she collapsed onto the hardpan, chest heaving. Her feet were torn to ribbons, and fever radiated off her like heat from a stove. The brass fragment lay in the dirt where it had fallen from her belt. Silas picked it up. A star pattern, curved symbols he couldn't read. He slipped it into his pocket. What's your name? Sarah, she whispered. Sarah Talkingstone. He glanced toward the road. Caldwell's dust cloud was gone, but neighbors still lingered. Harboring Apaches, even sick ones, could bring federal charges. But leaving her to die wasn't something his hands knew how to do. He slid his arms under her shoulders and knees, grunting as he lifted. She was solid, all muscle and bone. Her head lolled against his chest as he carried her toward the cabin. The door's foreclosure notice flapped in the breeze, mocking him with each step. Inside, the cabin smelled of old coffee and dust. He lowered her onto his bed, the only bed. She shivered despite the heat, her lips cracked and bleeding. He brought water in a tin cup, and she drank like the earth drank rain, desperate and deep. Need a doctor, he said. No white doctor will come. I'll make him. Her laugh was bitter. You don't know what you've done, bringing me here. He pulled a blanket over her. Reckon I saved your life. Reckon you ended yours. Her eyes closed. Within moments, her breathing turned shallow, the fever tightening its grip. He stood there watching her, this stranger who'd appeared in his well like some kind of omen. The brass fragment felt heavy in his pocket. Outside, the windmill creaked its steady complaint. Doc Miller's office sat above the general store, and the stairs smelled of tobacco and camphor. Silas climbed them 2 at a time, his boots loud on the wood. The doc looked up from his ledger, a thin man with spectacles that caught the afternoon light. Silas, heard about your trouble with Caldwell. Got other trouble now. Need you to come to the ranch. What for? Woman's sick. Fever. Might be heat stroke. Miller set down his pen. What woman? Silas hesitated. Through the window, he could see townspeople moving along the street below, their voices carrying in the still air. Apache woman. Found her dying at my well. The doc's face went hard. No. She'll die without help. Apache fever ain't my problem, Silas, and it sure as hell shouldn't be yours. Miller stood, closing his ledger with a snap. You bring that woman into your house, you're asking for trouble I won't be part of. I'll pay cash. Don't matter what you pay. I got a reputation to keep. The words stung worse than the foreclosure notice. Silas walked back down the stairs, each step heavier than the last. On the street, faces turned away. Mrs. Henderson clutched her son's hand and crossed to the other side. The blacksmith stopped his hammer mid-swing to stare. The pawnbroker's shop hunched at the end of the block, its windows grimy with neglect. Silas pushed through the door. The smell of old leather and metal polish filled the cramped space. He pulled his late wife's wedding ring from his vest pocket. Gold, simple, worn smooth from 19 years of wear. He'd kept it close since Martha died, a reminder of promises kept. The pawnbroker, a man named Saul with fingers like sausages, examined the ring under a jeweler's glass. $40. It's worth twice that. 40. Take it or don't. And Silas thought of Sarah shivering in his bed, thought of Martha's last days when he couldn't afford the medicine that might have saved her. Some choices you made once. Some you made over and over until they wore grooves in your soul. Give me the 40, and whatever quinine you got. Saul counted out the bills, added a small brown bottle to the pile. As Silas turned to leave, the pawnbroker leaned close, his breath sour with whiskey. Caldwell's offering $200 for anyone who reports you hiding her, he whispered. Just thought you should know. The door's bell jangled as Silas stepped back into the heat. 200. More than enough to tempt a man whose pockets ran empty. He walked toward his horse, the medicine bottle hard against his ribs, and felt the weight of eyes on his back. Every step toward home was a step toward something he couldn't name yet, something that felt like the moment before lightning strikes, when the air itself holds its breath. The territorial courthouse sat like a sun-bleached skull at the edge of town, adobe walls thick enough to keep the heat out and the law in. Silas climbed the steps 3 days after finding Sarah. His father's homestead deed rolled tight in his fist. Inside, the air smelled of ink and old paper. A clerk sat behind iron bars, shuffling documents with the bored efficiency of a man who'd seen every kind of desperation. Need to see Judge Harcourt, Silas said. He's in session, land dispute. That's why I'm here. The clerk glanced at the rolled deed, then at Silas's dust-covered clothes. Take a seat. The bench was hard oak, worn smooth by decades of waiting men. Silas sat, listening to the murmur of voices from the judge's chamber. Boot heels echoed in the hallway. A door opened and Caldwell emerged, smiling like a man who'd just won at cards. Their eyes met. Caldwell's smile widened. Drummond, didn't expect to see you here. Came to straighten out your mistake. No mistake. Just law. The clerk called Silas's name. He stood, his knees stiff, and walked into the judge's chambers. Judge Milton Harcourt was 60 if he was a day, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many men lie. He sat behind a massive desk carved from dark wood, Caldwell's survey document spread before him like a map to hell. Mr. Drummond, I understand you're contesting the resurvey. Yes, sir. Silas unrolled his father's deed, smoothing it across the desk. My father homesteaded this land in 1867. Recorded proper at the land office. This here's the original claim. Harcourt examined the document, his reading glasses catching the light from the window. He ran his finger along the boundary descriptions, comparing them to Caldwell's survey. Minutes passed. The only sound was the tick of a clock on the wall and the scratch of the judge's pen as he made notes. Finally, Harcourt looked up. Mr. Drummond, I don't doubt your father filed this claim in good faith, but territorial law is clear. When new surveys are conducted using modern equipment, they supersede prior instruments. Caldwell's surveyor, Amos Finch, is certified by the Territorial Authority. His measurements are official. Official doesn't mean right. In the eyes of the law, it does. Harcourt's voice carried the weight of a man tired of delivering bad news. The resurvey places your well in North Pasture within the railroad land grant boundaries? I'm sorry, but that's the finding. Silas felt the floor tilt beneath him. So a man can just draw new lines and steal what's been mined for near 20 years? The law doesn't recognize it as theft when proper procedures are followed. Harcourt slid the homestead deed back across the desk. You have 30 days to vacate. If you wish to appeal, you'll need to file with the Territorial Supreme Court in Phoenix. That process takes 6 months, minimum. Don't have 6 months. Then I suggest you make arrangements, Mr. Drummond. The gavel's crack echoed like a gunshot. Silas walked out into the afternoon glare, his father's deed heavy as a tombstone. The street wavered in the heat. His horse stood at the hitching post, head low, waiting. Drummond. Caldwell's voice came from the alley beside the courthouse. He stood in the shade, thumbs hooked in his vest pockets. His suit was Eastern cut, expensive, the kind that made working men feel small. Got a minute? Caldwell asked. Silas said nothing. His jaw ached from clenching. Caldwell stepped closer, keeping his voice low. Look, I know this feels personal, but it's just business. Railroad's paying $50,000 for a water corridor through that valley. Your well's the keystone. Without it, the whole route falls apart. So you forged a survey. Finch did his job proper. Modern equipment, new measurements. Can't help it if the old surveys were off. Silas's hands curled into fists. My father walked that land with a compass and chain. Every stake, every marker. He didn't miss by 2 miles. Caldwell pulled a leather wallet from his coat, counted out bills. $500, cash. You take it, walk away quiet, and we both move on. That's more than fair for land that's legally mine. The insult of it, $500 for ground worth $12,000, for water rights worth $8, hit Silas like a fist to the gut. His wife's ring had bought $40 of medicine. His cattle were worth $10 a head. And this man stood here offering chump change for a legacy. You know what 500 buys, Silas said, his voice low and steady. A lame horse and a bad conscience. Caldwell's smile faded. Don't be stupid. You fight this, you'll lose everything. Legal fees alone will bankrupt you, and that Apache woman you're hiding? That's a federal offense. I got friends in the territorial marshal's office. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Caldwell tucked his bills back into his wallet. Clock's ticking, Drummond. 30 days. You can walk away with something or ride away with nothing. He turned to leave, his boots clicking on the boardwalk. Silas watched him go, tasting copper in his mouth. He'd bitten his cheek without realizing it. The sun beat down like a hammer. In the distance, thunder rumbled without rain. Silas worked his jaw, spat blood into the dust at his feet, and watched it darken the pale dirt. Caldwell stopped in the corner, looked back. You just chose war, old man. When Silas returned to the ranch, the cabin door stood open. His heart kicked against his ribs. He dismounted fast, hand reaching for the rifle he didn't carry anymore. Sarah sat on the porch steps wrapped in a blanket despite the heat. Her fever had broken. Color had returned to her face, though she still looked like a strong wind could knock her flat. Thought you might have run, he said. Thought about it. She watched him tie the horse. But I owe you a debt. Don't owe me nothing. Water debt is sacred. My father taught me that. And she shifted, wincing. Her feet were still raw. You went to the white man's court. How'd you know? Your face, it carries defeat like dust carries on wind. He sat beside her on the steps. The wood was sun-warmed, smooth from years of use. Judge sided with Caldwell, says the new survey's legal. New survey is lie? Can't prove that. And Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached for a piece of charcoal from the fire pit and a scrap of paper he'd left on the porch, part of an old seed catalog. She began to draw, her large hands surprisingly delicate. What are you doing? He asked. Showing you what the white man forgot. She sketched rough circles, then lines radiating outward like a compass. Within each circle, she carved symbols, jagged marks, curves, dots arranged in patterns. The charcoal scratched against the paper, a sound like secrets being whispered. Apache boundary stones, she said, carved when the land was divided. North stone faces the morning star. East stone catches first sun. South stone marks where shadows are shortest. West stone sees last light. Silas leaned closer. The symbols looked like nothing he'd seen in surveyor's notes. Your people made these? My father and the red-beard surveyor made them together. 1868, I watched. I was 12 summers. Her finger traced the star pattern she'd drawn. This mark, same as the brass you found in your well. He pulled the fragment from his pocket. In daylight, the star was clearer, 5 points with smaller symbols around the edge. It matched her drawing exactly. Your father was Chief Talking Stone, he said, remembering the name. Yes. He signed the treaty that gave white men some land and kept some for my people. The red-beard man, he had a name like a tool. Finch? Finley? Finch. Amos Finch. Yes, Finch. He and my father walked the land for many days. They planted brass markers at the true boundaries. 4 of them, 1 for each direction. She tapped the paper. Your well sits on the center stone, the place where all 4 lines meet. Silas's pulse quickened. If those markers are still there, they prove the new survey is false. Your land is your land. The railroad man is thief. Hope kindled in his chest, fragile as a candle in wind. Can you find them? The stones? If my legs remember what my eyes saw. She folded the paper carefully. But white judge will not believe Apache woman. He will say I lie to help you. Then we find the brass markers, physical proof. Even a judge can't argue with that. Sarah looked at him with something that might have been pity. You still believe their law serves truth. Got to believe something. The sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the sky copper and rust. Sarah taught him the symbols, making him repeat them until his fingers could trace them in the dirt without thinking. North, east, southwest. Star alignments, shadow angles. The language of a land most men never learned to read. Full dark had fallen when the horse approached. Silas heard it first. Single rider, coming careful. He stepped off the porch, wished again for his rifle. Tom Greaves dismounted in the yard, a leather satchel under his arm. He was younger than Silas by a decade, a bank agent with honest eyes and a reputation for keeping his word. Tom, it's late for visiting. Got something you need to see. Didn't want to do it in daylight. Tom glanced at Sarah on the porch. Ma'am. She nodded, but said nothing. They went inside. Silas lit a kerosene lamp, and the cabin filled with the smell of burning oil. Tom spread papers across the table. Hand-drawn maps, ledger copies, land office records. Been doing some digging, Tom said. Caldwell's filed 7 land claims in the past 2 years, all of them using Finch as surveyor. All of them along the proposed railroad corridor. Silas studied the maps. Each one showed a ranch, a boundary dispute, a corrected survey that moved lines in Caldwell's favor. 6 of these went through already, Tom continued. Ranchers got pushed out, lost their appeals, ended up selling for pennies. One of them was my father. Silas looked up. Didn't know that. He was number 3 on this list. Lost 2 sections of good grazing land, died 2 years later, broke and bitter. Tom's jaw worked. I was just starting at the bank then. Didn't understand how it worked, but I understand now. It's fraud. It's legal fraud. That's what makes it so damned hard to fight. Tom tapped one of the maps. But there's a pattern here. Every survey Finch files shows the same kind of error. Boundaries shift north and east, always in ways that benefit the railroad, always in ways that push water rights into Caldwell's hands. Judge won't care about patterns. He wants proof. Then find it. Tom rolled the maps carefully. Find something that proves Finch is lying. Original markers, witnesses, something concrete. You do that. I'll testify. I'll show this pattern to every newspaper between here and Phoenix. Could lose your job. Tom's smile was grim. Already lost my father. Job's just a job. They shook hands. Tom's grip was firm, the clasp of a man who'd made peace with consequences. After he left, Silas stood in the doorway watching dust settle in the moonlight. Sarah appeared beside him, silent as smoke. Your friend has courage, she said. My friend's father is number 3 on a list of dead men. Then we make sure yours is not number 7. The second courthouse visit came on a morning when the sky looked like dirty brass. Silas had spent the week searching for the boundary stones with Sarah, riding the perimeter of his land until his backside went numb. They'd found markings on rocks, weathered carvings that might have been Apache symbols or might have been wind, erosion, nothing definite, nothing a judge would accept. Sarah insisted on coming to the hearing. Silas had argued against it, but she'd simply stood and walked to his horse, her feet still wrapped in cloth. Some arguments you couldn't win. The courtroom was fuller this time. Word had spread. Ranchers sat in the back rows, men whose faces Silas knew from church and cattle sales. None of them met his eyes. The preacher, Reverend Tolliver, sat near the front, his Bible closed on his lap like a shield. Caldwell arrived with 2 men Silas didn't recognize. Railroad lawyers, by the look of their clothes. They carried leather cases thick with documents. Judge Harcourt entered, and everyone stood. The scrape of boots on wood floor sounded like 100 small surrenders. Be seated. We're here regarding the Drummond land dispute. Mr. Caldwell has petitioned for expedited resolution. No, Harcourt's voice was tired. The weariness of a man who'd spent too many years splitting hairs between justice and law. Drummond, have you obtained legal counsel? No, sir. Can't afford it. I see. Harcourt shuffled papers. Mr. Caldwell's attorneys have provided additional documentation supporting the 1883 resurvey, modern theodolite measurements, verified coordinates, certification from the Territorial Surveyor's Office. The evidence is substantial. It's also false, Silas said. A murmur ran through the gallery. Caldwell's smile was thin as wire. That's a serious accusation, Harcourt said. Do you have evidence? Working on it. Working on it isn't evidence, Mr. Drummond. It's hope. The judge removed his glasses, cleaned them with a handkerchief. Without documentation to contradict the official survey, I have no choice but to rule in favor of Mr. Caldwell's claim. Your Honor, I'm giving you 7 days to vacate the property. After that, the sheriff will enforce removal. If you resist, you'll be charged with trespassing and held in contempt. Harcourt's gavel hovered. I'm sorry, Mr. Drummond, but the law is clear. Sarah stood. The sound of her rising, the creak of the bench, the rustle of her doe-skin dress, cut through the room like a knife through silk. I witnessed the 1868 survey, she said. Every head turned. The gallery exploded in whispers. Someone said, squaw, loud enough to carry. Another voice. Indian lover. Harcourt banged his gavel. Order. Who are you, ma'am? Sarah Talkingstone, daughter of Chief Talkingstone, who signed the treaty. And you claim to have witnessed the original survey? You would have been 12 summers. I walked with my father and the Redbeard surveyor for 6 days. I watched them plant brass markers at the 4 boundaries. The true boundary is 2 miles north of the lie this court accepts. Caldwell was on his feet. Your Honor, this is absurd. The testimony of a hostile Apache. I'm not hostile. I'm truthful. Sarah's voice carried the weight of stone. Your surveyor is the one who lies. That's enough. Harcourt's gavel cracked again. Miss Talkingstone, I appreciate your input, but uncorroborated testimony from a party with clear bias doesn't override certified documentation. Miss Drummond, 7 days. We're adjourned. The gavel fell like a period at the end of a death sentence. Outside, townspeople clustered in groups, their voices a low buzz of judgment. Silas helped Sarah down the courthouse steps. Her wrapped feet moved carefully on the stone. Shouldn't have spoken, he said. Made things worse. Truth makes things worse before it makes them better. Reverend Tolliver passed them on the street. Silas nodded. The preacher looked through him like he was glass. They rode back in silence, the sun climbing toward noon. By the time they reached the ranch, the heat was a physical thing, pressing down like a hand. Silas saw the buzzards first. black shapes circling over the north pasture. His gut went cold. "Stay here," he told Sarah. "No." They rode together toward the creek that fed his watering holes. The smell hit them before they saw it. Death, thick and sweet, mixing with the alkali dust. Flies rose in clouds. 30 head of cattle lay scattered along the dry creek bed. Their bodies were bloated, tongues swollen black. Some had made it halfway to the ranch before collapsing. Others had simply lain down where they stood and died of thirst. Silas dismounted, his legs unsteady. $600 of beef dead in the dirt. 3 years of breeding, careful selection, winter feeding, gone. The creek was completely dry. He walked upstream, following the sandy channel. Sarah followed on foot, her face grim. Half a mile up, they found the dam. It was crude, but effective. Logs and rocks piled across the narrow channel, diverting the creek into a runoff that disappeared into the hard ground. The wood was fresh cut, the work recent, and on the biggest log, burned deep into the wood with a branding iron, was Caldwell's cattle mark, the running C beneath it, carved with a knife. Price to pay. Silas stared at the words, his vision narrowing to a tunnel. His hands shook, not with fear, but with rage so pure it felt like ice in his veins. "He killed them," Silas said. "Killed them to make a point." Sarah touched the carved wood, her fingers tracing the letters. "This is not law. This is war." And they rode back to the ranch as the sun started its descent. The dead cattle stared at the sky with filmed eyes. Buzzards had already started their work. At the cabin, a new notice was nailed to the door. Federal Territory letterhead, official seal. Silas tore it down, read it once, then crumpled it in his fist. "What does it say?" Sarah asked. "Says I'm under investigation for harboring hostile Apaches in violation of federal containment policy. Says federal marshals will be conducting an inspection within the week." He let the paper fall. "Says if I'm found guilty, I forfeit all property rights and face up to 2 years in territorial prison." Sarah's face was stone. "He closes every door." "Not every door." Silas walked to the well, drew water, drank deep. The brass fragment in his pocket felt heavier now, almost burning. "We find those markers. We find them in 7 days, or none of this matters anyway. And if we don't, then I lose everything. And Caldwell wins." The windmill creaked overhead, a sound that had once been comforting. Now it sounded like time running out, each rotation a tick of a clock that wouldn't stop. Sarah looked toward the northern hills where shadows were already gathering. "Then we ride at first light. We dig until we bleed. We find the brass, or we die trying." The sun touched the horizon, painting the dead cattle's hides the color of old blood. That night, Sarah's fever came back with a vengeance. Silas found her shivering by the cold hearth, her skin burning hot enough to feel through the blanket. "How long?" he asked. "Since sunset," her teeth chattered. "Comes and goes. The heat, then the cold." He built a fire despite the summer warmth, fed it until the cabin glowed orange. The smell of burning mesquite filled the small space, mixing with the sharper scent of fever sweat. Sarah's breathing was labored, each inhale a conscious effort. Silas had $12 left. The pawnbroker's quinine was long gone. He could ride to town, try to find more medicine, but the stores would be closed, and even if they weren't, he wasn't sure anyone would sell to him now. "I'll be fine by morning," Sarah said, but her voice was thin as paper. "You need rest. Take the bed." It's your bed, and this is my debt to pay." And he helped her up, guided her to the narrow cot his wife had died in 3 years prior. The ropes creaked under Sarah's weight. "I'll sleep in the barn." "You don't have to." "I do." He pulled the blanket to her chin. "You came to help me. Least I can do is give you a place to heal." And she looked at him with eyes that held too much understanding. "You're losing everything because of me." I'm losing everything because of Caldwell. You're the only reason I got a chance to fight back." He left her there, the firelight dancing on the cabin walls. Outside, the night was cool for once, the desert breathing out the day's heat. Stars crowded the sky, like witnesses to something they couldn't quite name. The barn smelled of old hay and leather. Silas made a bed in the loft, his body aching from days in the saddle and nights with no sleep. He lay there listening to the horses shift below, thinking about Martha's wedding ring sitting in the pawnbroker's case, thinking about 30 dead cattle and 7 days left. Some choices cost you everything. But some costs you paid because not paying would cost you more. He woke to the sound of hooves, single rider, moving fast. Dawn was just breaking, the sky pale as bone. Silas climbed down from the loft, his joints protesting. Deputy Marshal Frank Drummond sat on his horse in the yard, badge catching the first light. He was 40, with Martha's eyes in their father's hard jaw. They'd never been close, not even when Martha was alive. After she died, the distance had grown into something uglier. "Frank?" "Silas." Frank didn't dismount. "Came to warn you." "Appreciate it." "Don't. I'm not doing it for you." Frank's horse stamped, sensing tension. "Federal marshals are coming day after tomorrow. They're not just investigating, they're planning to arrest you. Caldwell's got friends in the territorial office? Friends who owe him favors? Let them come. Jesus, Silas. You really want to die on this hill? Frank leaned forward in the saddle. You're harboring an Apache during peacetime restrictions. That's federal. They can take everything. The land, what's left of your herd, even the clothes on your back. Already taking the land. Not like this. This way, you end up in Yuma prison while Caldwell auctions off your property for back taxes. Frank's voice hardened. Martha would be ashamed of you. Choosing some Apache squaw over your family name, over everything her father built. Don't. Silas's voice cut like a blade. Don't you dare speak for her. Someone needs to. You sure as hell aren't honoring her memory. They stared at each other across the morning silence. A crow called from the windmill. The moment stretched tight as a rope. Finally, Frank straightened in his saddle. His face softened, just slightly. Martha kept a diary. Did you know that? Silas blinked. No. Found it last year cleaning out Pa's house. She wrote in it every day from the time she was 8 until... Frank's voice caught. Until the year she died. Thought you might want to read it. Remember her the way she was before the sickness took her? Oh, why tell me this now? Because maybe it'll remind you who you were, before you threw everything away. Frank gathered his reins. Diary's at my house. Come get it if you want, but do it before the marshals arrive. After that, you won't be welcome anywhere. He rode off, dust rising behind him like smoke from a dying fire. Silas stood in the yard, watching until Frank disappeared over the rise. The cabin door opened. Sarah stood there, wrapped in the blanket, her face still flushed with fever. Your wife's brother, she said. Yeah. He hates you. He hates what I'm doing. There's a difference. Sarah walked to the well, moving slow. She drew water with the rope and bucket, the pulley squeaking. When she lifted the dipper to her lips, she paused, looking at the brass fragment Silas had set on the well's stone rim the night before. Your wife, Sarah said. How did she die? Pneumonia, winter of '81. Doctor wanted $200 for the treatment that might have saved her. I had 40. Silas's throat tightened. By the time I scraped together the rest, it was too late. She said, now you spend your last money on medicine for me. You're not dead yet. She smiled, sad and knowing. Neither are you, but we're both dying in our own way. The sun climbed higher, warming the earth. Somewhere, in the distance, a coyote called, a sound like loneliness given voice. Sarah set down the dipper. The diary your brother mentioned, it means something to him. He wouldn't offer it unless it mattered. He offered it to remind me I'm failing her memory. Or to remind you of something you've forgotten. Silas looked at her. This woman who'd appeared in his, well, like an answer to a question he hadn't known to ask. She'd lost her people, her home, maybe even her future, and still she stood here trying to help him see past his own pain. We ride north today, he said. Fever or no fever, we've got 7 days and I'll be damned if I waste another one. Sarah nodded. Her hand rested on the well's rim, fingers touching the brass fragment with its star pattern and ancient markings. Then let's find what the land remembers, she said, even if men have forgotten. They rode north as the afternoon heat broke, Sarah on Silas's spare horse, a bay mare that had belonged to Martha. The animal remembered gentleness and responded to Sarah's touch, despite the fever that still burned in her skin. The land rose gradually, hardpan giving way to red rock formations that jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Sarah guided them by memory and instinct, stopping occasionally to study the angle of shadows, the position of the sun. There, she said, pointing to a mesa that stood alone against the darkening sky. The north stone sits at its base, where morning star touches earth. They reached the formation as twilight bled into full dark. The rock face was maybe 20 feet high, weathered smooth by wind and time. At its base, carved into a boulder the size of a wagon, were the symbols Sarah had drawn. Jagged lines, curves, dots arranged in patterns that looked almost like writing. Silas dismounted, ran his fingers over the carvings. They were deep, deliberate, cut with tools and purpose. Not wind erosion, not accident, this was language. North stone, Sarah said, sliding off her horse with a grunt. She pressed her palm flat against the rock. My father's hand touched here, and the red-beard man's. They carved together, so both peoples would remember. How do I read it? You wait. They waited. The stars emerged one by one, pinpricks of light in an endless black. Sarah sat on the ground, her breathing labored but steady. Silas watched the sky, watched the rock, tried to understand what he was supposed to see. Then he saw it. The North Star, Polaris bright and unwavering, aligned perfectly with a carved groove in the stone. The groove ran like a pointer, aiming south across the valley toward where his ranch sat invisible in the darkness. The line, he whispered. The boundary. Stand at North Stone when the morning star wakes, follow the groove, and you walk the true edge of the treaty land. Sarah's voice held pride and grief tangled together. My father wanted no confusion. He carved the sky into stone so even blind men could find truth. Silas followed the line with his eyes, tracing it across the black expanse. Somewhere out there, 2 miles south of where they sat, Caldwell's false boundary ran. But here, the real line held firm, written in rock and starlight. The brass markers, he said. Where? Center point, where all 4 boundary lines meet. She stood, wobbling slightly. You're well. We've been standing on the proof the whole time. Proof is only proof if you can hold it in your hands. They mounted again, riding back under a sky so thick with stars it looked like spilled salt. Sarah's fever made her sway in the saddle, but she gripped the reins with determination that bordered on stubbornness. By the time they reached the ranch, the moon was high and bright. Sarah dismounted, walked straight to the well without a word. She knelt beside it, pressed her ear to the stone rim. What are you doing? Silas asked. Listening. For what? Memory. She stood, moved 3 paces east, knelt again. Her fingers traced patterns in the dirt that only she could see. Then she stopped, looked up at him with eyes that reflected moonlight like mirrors. Here, dig here. Silas fetched a shovel from the barn. The blade bit into hard-packed earth, each scoop an argument with gravity and time. Sarah watched, occasionally directing him, left deeper careful. 1 foot down, the shovel hit something that rang like a bell. Silas's heart kicked. He dropped to his knees, used his hands to scrape away the remaining dirt. His fingers touched metal, cold, solid, unmistakable. He dug faster, uncovering the edges. It was a disc, maybe 8 inches across, made of brass gone green with age. On its face, carved deep and clear despite 16 years underground, was the star pattern, 5 points, exact and perfect. Around the edge, 2 inscriptions, one in English, one in symbols he now recognized as Apache. U.S. Territorial Survey 1868 read the English. Below it, coordinates, latitude and longitude precise to the second. Silas lifted it from the earth. It was heavy, substantial, the weight of truth given form. The brass was pitted with age, the patina of decades. The kind of wear you couldn't fake even if you tried. It matches, he said, pulling the fragment from his pocket. Where the fragment was broken, the edges aligned perfectly with the full disc. 2 pieces of the same marker, separated by time and circumstance. Sarah touched the disc with reverence. My father's mark. See? She pointed to the Apache symbols. Talking stone, chief treaty keeper. Hoofbeats interrupted the moment. Silas stood fast, the brass disc clutched in both hands. A rider emerged from the darkness. Tom Greaves, his horse lathered and breathing hard. Silas. Tom dismounted in a rush. Been riding since sundown looking for you. What happened? Finch. Tom's grin was fierce, triumphant. Found him at the saloon, drowning his conscience in whiskey. I bought him 3 more drinks and asked about his surveying work. And? He talked. God, did he talk. Tom pulled a folded paper from his vest, wrote it down while he was too drunk to remember saying it. Caldwell paid him $2,000 to adjust the coordinates. $2,000, Silas. Finch has a gambling debt in Tucson, owed money to men who break legs for late payment. Caldwell offered him a way out, and Finch took it. Silas stared at the paper, then at the brass disc in his hands. He admitted it, in front of witnesses? Bartender heard every word. So did 3 ranch hands from the Double J. Tom's voice shook with barely contained fury. Finch is passed out drunk in the back room right now. Come morning, he's going to wake up and realize what he's done. If we're lucky, he'll run. If we're not, Caldwell will make sure he does. Sarah stood, moved to Tom's side. You risk much for us. My father was on Caldwell's list. He died broken. Tom looked at her, then at Silas, his jaw set. I won't let that happen again. Not while I can still hold a pen and testify under oath. As Silas felt the pieces coming together, the brass marker, the boundary stones, Tom's fraud map, Finch's drunken confession, it was enough. It had to be enough. We take this to the judge, Silas said. Tomorrow, all of us. We show him the brass, show him the pattern, make Finch repeat what he said sober. Finch won't testify. He'll deny everything. Then we testify. You, me, Sarah, the bartender, the ranch hands. Silas held up the disc, let moonlight catch the inscriptions. And we let this speak for itself. Brass don't lie, even when men do. Tom nodded slowly. Judge won't like it. He ruled against you already. Admitting he was wrong is the only way to make this right. A coyote howled from the mesa, long and mournful. Sarah swayed on her feet, and Tom caught her elbow before she fell. She needs rest, Tom said. We all need rest, but we won't get it until this is done. Silas looked at the brass disc, felt its weight in his hands like a promise made in metal and time. 5 days left. Caldwell's gonna know we found something. He'll come at us with everything he's got. Let him come. Sarah said, her voice stronger than her body. The earth remembers truth, and truth don't burn. Dawn came gray and uncertain, the sky holding back the sun like a man holding back bad news. Silas was feeding the horses when Frank returned, riding slow this time, a leather-bound book tucked under his arm. Silas, he turned. Frank looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes red-rimmed, his badge catching no light in the dim morning. Frank brought the diary. Frank dismounted, held the book out like an offering. Like I said, thought you should read it. Silas took it. The leather was worn soft, the pages yellowed at the edges. Martha's name was embossed on the cover in faded gold letters. His throat tightened just holding it. "Why now?" he asked. "Why bring this when you're telling me to give up?" Frank didn't answer right away. He walked to the well, looked down into its dark mouth. Started reading it myself last night. Couldn't sleep, so I read. Started at the beginning, when she was just a kid. Sarah emerged from the cabin, wrapped in a blanket. She moved quiet, watching the two men with careful eyes. Frank pulled off his hat, turned it in his hands. There's an entry from August 1868. She was 9 years old. You want to read it yourself, or you want me to tell you? Tell me. Frank's voice went soft, the hard edges worn down by whatever he'd found in those pages. She wrote about a drought, bad one. Their well went dry. This well, the one our father dug when he first claimed the land. Pa tried digging deeper, but hit bedrock. They were down to half a cup of water per person per day. She wrote that her mother cried at night, thinking the children would die of thirst. The windmill creaked overhead. A mourning dove called from the barn. Then one day, Frank continued, an Apache girl showed up. Tall, even for her age, maybe 12, 13. Martha wrote that she was scared at first. There'd been raids that summer, tensions running high. But this girl, she didn't carry weapons. She just walked up to their cabin and said, in broken English, "I show you water." Silas felt his chest tighten. He looked at Sarah, who stood perfectly still, her face unreadable. The girl led Pa and Martha 3 miles north, Frank said, to a spring hidden in the rocks. Clean water, cold and clear, enough to save the family, save the livestock. Martha wrote that Pa offered the girl money, but she refused. Said her father taught her that water belongs to no one, that thirst makes all people kin. Frank opened the diary, his finger marking a page. He held it out so Silas could see the child's careful handwriting, the ink faded, but legible. The tall Apache girl saved us. Papa says we owe her our lives. I asked her name, but she wouldn't tell me. She just smiled and walked away. I will never forget her face. She had kind eyes. That girl, Frank said, his voice breaking, was her, Sarah Talkingstone. I compared Martha's description to the woman standing in your yard right now. Same height, same markings on her hands, same age. It was her, Silas. She saved Martha's life when they were both children. Silas looked at Sarah. She met his gaze without flinching, but something in her eyes softened. Not surprise, but recognition, like she'd been waiting for this truth to catch up. You knew, Silas said. When you saw the ranch, you knew this was the same place. I remember the well, Sarah said quietly. The way it sits, the rocks. Your wife had yellow hair and a gap between her teeth. She gave me cornbread before I left. Frank's hands trembled as he closed the diary. I came here to warn you off, to tell you you were dishonoring Martha's memory. But the truth is, you're the only one honoring it. You're doing exactly what she would have wanted, repaying a debt that our family owed for 36 years and never acknowledged. He handed the diary to Silas, then turned to Sarah. His face worked, emotions fighting for control. Ma'am, he said, his voice rough, I apologize for my words yesterday, for everything. You saved my sister's life, and I repaid that by calling you names and threatening the man who sheltered you. Sarah stepped forward, placed a hand on Frank's shoulder. Your sister had a good heart. You carry it still, even when you forget. Frank nodded, unable to speak. He mounted his horse quickly, like a man fleeing his own shame. The marshal's still coming? Silas asked. Day after tomorrow, but I'll be riding with you to the courthouse today. If you're planning to show that brass marker to Judge Harcourt, you'll need someone with a badge to make sure you get there alive. He rode off, not toward town, but toward the northern hills, as if he needed distance to sort through what he'd learned. Silas stood holding Martha's diary, feeling the weight of years compressed into paper and ink. Sarah moved beside him, her presence a quiet comfort. You never told me, he said. You never asked. And the debt was mine to carry, not yours. Until I gave you water. Until you gave me water, she agreed, and made it ours. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted. But these came from the east, fast and purposeful. A young Apache man appeared over the rise, riding a painted horse with ceremonial markings. He couldn't have been more than 20, his face painted with white clay and geometric patterns. He spoke rapid Apache to Sarah. She responded, her voice taking on a different cadence, the language flowing like water over stone. The conversation lasted maybe 2 minutes, urgent and intense. The young man nodded once, then looked at Silas. In careful English, he said, "She calls, we answer." "Oh, wait," Silas said. "Who calls? What does that mean?" Sarah turned to him, and for the first time since he'd found her in his well, she smiled. Not sad, not resigned, but fierce. "I sent word 3 days ago, when we found the North Stone. Sent it through runners and smoke signals. Asked my people to remember the treaty, to remember the boundary." "Sarah, what did you do?" "I asked them to come, to stand as witnesses, to show the white man's judge that Apache memory is long and Apache honor is real." She gestured to the young warrior. "This is my sister's son. He carries the message back. By tomorrow night, they will gather at the treaty stones." "How many?" "All of them." Her eyes held starlight and steel. "Every warrior who remembers, every elder who walked the boundary, every soul who knows that land and law and truth are the same word in different languages." The nephew wheeled his horse, ready to ride. Silas grabbed his bridle. "Wait, if they come, armed warriors on treaty land, the army could see it as an act of war." The nephew looked down at him with the patience of someone explaining the obvious. "Not war, witness. We enforce the treaty our grandfathers signed. If white soldiers have problem with treaty, they break law. Not us." He kicked his horse and was gone, dust rising like smoke signals against the morning sky. Sarah swayed, and Silas caught her before she fell. The fever had never truly left. "Should have asked me first," he said, lowering her to sit on the well's edge. "Would you have said yes?" "No. That is why I did not ask." She pressed her hand to the cool stone. "Tomorrow we go to the white judge, with brass and truth and witnesses. 300 voices saying the same words. Even deaf men will hear." And in the distance, so faint it might have been imagination, drums began to echo from the mesas. Silas woke to thunder that wasn't thunder. The earth was shaking. Not earthquake. Something rhythmic, purposeful, like the heartbeat of something vast moving across the land. He rolled out of the barn loft, grabbed his boots, and ran into the pre-dawn darkness. The horizon was alive with movement. They came from the north in a line so long it seemed to have no end. Mounted warriors on painted horses, their silhouettes black against the purple sky. The sound of 300 horses moving as one was like nothing Silas had ever heard. Not thunder, not stampede, but something older, something that made his bones remember things his mind had never known. Sarah stood in the ranch yard, wrapped in a blanket, her face turned toward the approaching riders. She looked small and fragile, but when she spoke, her voice carried. "They came," she said. "All of them." The warriors spread out as they approached, forming a line that stretched east to west across the valley. They moved with precision, stopping at intervals that seemed random until Silas understood. They were marking the boundary. The true boundary, the one carved in stone and starlight. The lead rider approached the ranch, dismounted 20 paces out. He was older, maybe 60, with gray streaking his long hair. He wore ceremonial dress, leather and feathers, paint marking his face in the old patterns. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority earned, not claimed. "I am Red Hawk, War Chief of the White Mountain Apache. Sarah Talking Stone has called witness to the Treaty of 1868. We answer." Silas found his voice. "I'm grateful. But if the army sees this, let them see. We stand on treaty ground. We carry no weapons of war." Red Hawk gestured to the line of warriors. "We carry memory. We carry truth. If white soldiers attack us for remembering, they break the law they made us sign." Sarah stepped forward, spoke in Apache. Red Hawk responded, his tone respectful. The exchange lasted maybe a minute, then he nodded and remounted. "We hold the line until the white judge sees," he said. "We do not move. We do not fight. We stand." The warriors began a low chant, rhythmic and steady. It wasn't a war song. Silas had heard those before in the years of fighting. This was different. This was ceremony. This was prayer made sound. The sun broke the horizon, and the light caught the warriors. 300 men on horseback, painted and dressed for witness, standing perfectly still along a line invisible to everyone except Sarah and the land itself. Tom Greaves rode in from the south, his horse wild-eyed and lathered. "Jesus Christ, Silas. The whole town's awake. People are panicking. They think it's a raid." "It's not a raid." Tell that to the sheriff. He's rounding up every man with a rifle." Tom spotted the brass marker sitting on the well's edge, caught the morning light. "Is that it? Is that the proof?" "That's it." Frank arrived minutes later, his deputy's badge catching the sun. Behind him came Judge Harcourt in a buggy, flanked by the sheriff and 4 armed men. The judge looked like a man who'd been dragged from bed against his will, disheveled, furious, and deeply uncomfortable. The buggy stopped at the edge of the ranch. Harcourt climbed down, his eyes going wide as he took in the line of warriors stretching across the valley. "What in God's name is this?" he demanded. "Witnesses," Sarah said, stepping forward. "To the treaty your government signed. To the boundary your surveyors marked. To the truth your courts forgot." This is an act of aggression. This is an act of standing," Red Hawk called out, his English clear and precise. "We hold treaty ground. We carry no guns. If you see war and peace, the blindness is yours." Harcourt's face went red. "Sheriff, I want these." "You want what, Judge?" Frank's voice cut through. "You want a massacre? You want to explain to the territorial governor why you ordered deputies to fire on unarmed Apaches standing on treaty land?" The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. His men looked at each other, none of them eager to be the first to raise a weapon. Caldwell arrived in a hired carriage, stepping down with the careful dignity of a man trying to control a situation, spinning away from him. "Judge Harcourt, I must insist—" "You insist nothing, Caldwell." Harcourt was breathing hard, his face slick with sweat despite the morning cool. He turned to Silas. "You." "Drummond, what is this about?" Silas picked up the brass marker, held it so the light caught the inscriptions. "This is about truth, Your Honor. Found it buried 3 feet down at my well, right where Sarah Talkingstone said it would be. Original 1868 boundary marker, U.S. Territorial Survey, coordinates and all." He walked forward, handed it to the judge. Harcourt took it, his hands trembling slightly. He turned the disc over, studying the inscriptions, the patina, the weight. "This could be a forgery," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Brass like that don't lie," Tom said, stepping forward. "Takes years to get that patina, decades. And I got something else for you, Judge." He pulled out the fraud map, unfolded it on the hood of Harcourt's buggy. 6 ranches, 6 land disputes, all of them using Amos Finch as surveyor, all of them moving boundaries in ways that benefit the railroad, all of them resulting in foreclosures that put water rights in Caldwell's hands. This is circumstantial." Finch confessed. Tom's voice rang clear. 3 nights ago, saloon, in front of witnesses. Said Caldwell paid him $2,000 to adjust the survey coordinates. Said he had gambling debts in Tucson and Caldwell offered him a way out. Caldwell went pale. "That's a lie. Finch is a drunk. You can't—" "Bartender will testify," Tom said. "So will 3 ranch hands from the Double J. So will I. We all heard him say it, clear as day." Frank stepped forward, pulled Martha's diary from his saddlebag. "And I got this, Judge. My sister's diary, from 1868. She wrote about an Apache girl who saved our family during the drought, led them to water when their well went dry. That girl was Sarah Talkingstone. The same woman standing here now. The same woman who witnessed the original survey when she was 12 years old." He opened to the marked page, held it out. Harcourt read, his face going from red to white to gray. "Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fever still burning in her skin. "I walked 6 days with my father and the red-beard surveyor. I watched them plant brass markers at 4 corners. I watched them carve stones to mark the line. Your surveyor Finch says the boundary is here." She pointed south. "But the brass says it is there." She pointed north to where the warriors sat motionless on their horses. 300 witnesses say the same. The land says the same. Only the paper lies." The silence, stretched like wire, pulled too tight. The warriors' chant continued, low and steady. The sun climbed higher, painting everything the color of brass and old promises. Finally, Harcourt turned to the sheriff. "Get Amos Finch. Bring him here, now." The sheriff hesitated. "Judge, I'm not sure." "Now, goddammit." 2 deputies galloped toward town. The remaining men stood in an uneasy cluster, rifles lowered but ready. The warriors didn't move. The chanting continued. They waited. 10 minutes, 20. The sun grew hot and flies began to circle. Silas stood beside Sarah, the brass marker back in his hands, feeling its weight like an anchor. When the deputies returned, Finch rode between them, his hands tied to his saddle horn. He looked like a man who'd spent 3 days contemplating hell. Unshaven, red-eyed, broken. "Finch," Harcourt said, his voice like iron. "Did you falsify the 1883 survey of the Drummond property?" Finch's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Answer the question." Finch's voice cracked. "I adjusted some coordinates, for accuracy. Modern equipment allows for—" "How much did Caldwell pay you?" The question hit like a fist. Finch's shoulders sagged. $2,000. Caldwell lunged forward. "You drunken fool, shut your—" "Enough." Harcourt's voice cracked across the valley. He held up the brass marker, let the sun catch it. "This brass has 1868 coordinates. Finch's survey has different coordinates. One of these is true. One is fraud." He looked at Finch. "Which is it?" Finch stared at his bound hands. The brass is true. I moved the line 2 miles south to encompass the well. Caldwell needed the water rights for the railroad corridor. He was going bankrupt without them. He offered me money. I took it. The words fell like stones into water, each one making ripples that spread and spread. Harcourt turned slowly to face Caldwell. You suborned perjury. You bribed a territorial surveyor. You committed fraud against a federal land office. You attempted to steal a man's lawfully claimed property. Judge, you don't understand the economic pressures. Oh, I understand that the law is the law, Mr. Caldwell, even when it's inconvenient. Harcourt looked at the line of warriors, at Sarah standing fever-bright and defiant, at Silas holding the brass proof of truth that wouldn't bend, especially when it's inconvenient. He pulled a document from his jacket, the foreclosure order he'd signed. In full view of everyone gathered, he tore it in half. The Drummond property claim is hereby restored in full, all rights, privileges, and boundaries as established by the original 1868 survey. He pointed at Caldwell. You are under arrest pending federal investigation. Sheriff, take him into custody. Oh, this isn't over, Caldwell hissed. I have friends, powerful friends. You'll regret. The only thing I regret, Harcourt said quietly, is that I almost let you get away with it. As the sheriff led Caldwell away, the warriors' chant rose, not triumphant, but solemn, an acknowledgement of balance restored. Red Hawk raised his hand and the chant ceased. The silence that followed was profound. The treaty holds, Red Hawk said. The boundary stands. We go now. As one, 300 warriors turned their horses and began the ride north. They moved in formation, disciplined and proud, the morning sun catching the dust they raised until it looked like gold hanging in the air. Sarah swayed. Silas caught her before she fell, lowered her to sit on the well's edge. She was burning up, the fever finally claiming what was owed. You did it, he said. We did it. Her smile was weak but real. The land remembers, even when we forget. Tom and Frank stood nearby, watching the warriors disappear into the distance. Judge Harcourt climbed back into his buggy, looking 20 years older than when he'd arrived. Mr. Drummond, he called. I owe you an apology and a debt. Don't owe me nothing, Judge. Just did what the law should have done in the first place. Harcourt nodded, snapped the reins, and drove away. The ranch fell quiet except for the windmill's creak and the sound of Sarah's labored breathing. The brass marker sat on the well's stone rim, catching the light, holding the truth that had always been there. Just buried, waiting for someone brave enough to dig. The news spread through town faster than wildfire. By noon, people Silas hadn't seen in weeks appeared at his ranch. Some apologetic, some curious, all of them wanting to see the brass marker that had stopped a land grab and prevented a war. Doc Miller came, hat in hand. Silas, I was wrong about the woman, about everything. She's still got fever, Silas said. Still needs a doctor. Miller nodded, went inside without another word. When he emerged an hour later, he carried a bag of medicines and refused payment. Consider it penance, he said, and left before Silas could argue. The pawnbroker arrived in the afternoon, bringing Martha's wedding ring in a velvet pouch. No charge, he said. Figure I owed you that much. Silas took the ring, felt its familiar weight. Saul, you told me Caldwell was offering $200 for information. I did. But you didn't collect. The pawnbroker's smile was sad and knowing. My grandfather fled pogroms in Poland. Came here with nothing. This country gave him a chance when no one else would. He gestured toward the cabin where Sarah rested. Figure I can extend the same courtesy, even if it costs me. And by evening, Tom arrived with papers from the Territorial Land Office. Official restoration of Silas's property, signed and sealed. The boundaries matched the brass marker's coordinates exactly. Caldwell's name had been struck from every document, replaced with stamps that read, fraud investigation pending. He's finished, Tom said. Railroad's pulling out of the deal. Chicago investors are calling in his debts. He'll be lucky if he doesn't end up in prison. Good, Silas said, and meant it. Frank came last. As the sun was setting, he carried a hammer and a handful of nails. Together, he and Silas removed the foreclosure notice from the cabin door. Frank folded it carefully, tucked it in his saddlebag. Martha would be proud of you, Frank said, of what you did, who you helped. Just paid a debt that was 36 years overdue. Still, Frank extended his hand. I'm sorry for my words, my anger, my blindness. They shook, the grip firm and honest. When Frank rode away, the sun was touching the horizon, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. Sarah was stronger the next morning. The fever had broken during the night, leaving her weak but clear-eyed. She sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a clean blanket, watching the windmill turn in the breeze. How do you feel? Silas asked. Like I've been carrying something heavy and finally set it down. He sat beside her, the brass marker in his hands. He'd cleaned it the night before, scrubbed away the dirt and patina until both inscriptions, English and Apache, shone bright in the morning light. "Been thinking about where to put this," he said. "It belongs at the well, where it was buried, where it can see both worlds." Together, they walked to the well's stone rim. Silas had already prepared a space, a flat stone mortared to the rim's top, visible from any approach. He set the brass marker into place, pressing it firm into fresh mortar. The star pattern caught the light. The inscriptions faced outward, readable from all directions, a declaration that the earth remembered even when men forgot. "It's permanent now," Silas said. "Good. Permanence is what truth deserves." They stood there in silence, the morning sun warming their backs. The windmill creaked its steady rhythm. In the distance, a hawk called, one long cry that echoed across the valley. "You'll go back to your people," Silas said. Not a question. "Yes, my place is there, but I will remember this place, this well, this debt repaid. You saved my land, my legacy, and you saved my life. Twice. Once with water, once with dignity." She touched the brass marker. "We are even now. The balance is restored." A horse appeared from the north. Her nephew, the young warrior who'd carried her message. He dismounted, spoke briefly in Apache. Sarah nodded, responded. "He will take me home," she said. "My people wait." Silas helped her mount, though she needed little help now. Strength was returning, flowing back into her like water into dry ground. She sat the horse easily, her back straight, her presence commanding. "If drought comes again," she said, looking down at him, "you know where to find me. And if my people need water, they know where to find you. The well's always open, and the memory is always true." She gathered the reins. "Goodbye, Silas Drummond. You are a good man. Your wife chose well. So did Chief Talkingstone. You're your father's daughter." She smiled, full and genuine, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Then she turned the horse and rode north, her nephew beside her. They moved steady and sure, two figures growing smaller against the vast landscape until they disappeared into the shimmering heat. Silas stood by the well, hand resting on the brass marker, and watched until there was nothing left to see but sky and earth and the long memory of water shared between strangers who became something more. The windmill creaked, the hawk called again, and the land, patient and eternal, held its peace. I reckon every man reaches a point where he looks back on his life and tries to make sense of the choices that shaped it. For me, that moment comes most evenings when I sit on this porch, watching the sun drop behind the mesa, listening to the windmill creak its steady song. That was 5 years ago now. 5 years since Sarah Talkingstone emerged from my well, like an answer to a question I didn't know I was asking. 5 years since 300 Apache warriors stood witness to a truth that paper had tried to bury. The brass marker's still there, mortared to the well's rim where anyone who draws water can see it. The inscriptions have weathered some wind and rain, doing what wind and rain do, but they're still readable. English on one side, Apache symbols on the other. Two languages saying the same thing. This boundary holds. This truth stands. Folks come by sometimes to look at it, travelers mostly, people who heard the story and want to see the proof with their own eyes. I tell them what happened, how a dying woman and a desperate man found that the law and the land don't always speak the same language. But when they do, something powerful happens. Caldwell went to prison. Federal charges, fraud, bribery, the whole catalog of sins that come from valuing money over truth. Last I heard, he was serving 7 years in Yuma. The railroad found another corridor, one they paid for honest. Turns out you can build empires without stealing water from widowers. Tom Greaves runs the bank now. The old manager retired under a cloud of questions about which land deals he'd known about and when. Tom's fair, careful, the kind of man who understands that numbers on paper should match the worth of what they're measuring. Frank stops by most weeks. We've grown comfortable with each other's silences, learned that family isn't just blood, it's who shows up when showing up costs something. He never remarried after his wife died. Says he's got enough ghosts to keep him company without adding new ones. The cattle herd's rebuilt. Took 3 years and every spare dollar, but I'm back to 200 head now. They drink from the well every evening, and I think about how water connects everything, the living, the dead, the ones who'll come after. I planted Martha's ring in the ground beneath a cottonwood sapling the year after Sarah left. Seemed right, somehow, returning gold to earth, letting something grow from what was lost. The tree's taller than me now, leaves turning silver in the breeze. Sometimes I sit under it and read her diary, remembering the girl who gave cornbread to a stranger and never forgot the kindness. Sarah came back once, 2 summers ago, brought her nephew and his new wife, showed them the well and the brass marker, told them the story in Apache, while I listened to the rhythm of words I couldn't understand, but somehow knew. She was grayer, thinner, but her eyes still held that fierce clarity that had first caught me in the well's shadow. "The water remembers," she said before leaving. I believe her. Some debts you pay with money, some with blood. But the ones that matter most, the ones that change you down in the bone, those you pay with truth. With standing when it cost you everything to stand. With giving water to a stranger even when the world says strangers are enemies. The windmill creaks. The hawk calls. The brass catches the last light of day and throws it back at the sky like a promise kept. I'm 57 now, getting old the way a man does when he's made peace with his choices. When the dust settles on me for good, I hope they'll say I gave water when water was needed, that I stood for what was right when right wasn't easy, and that the brass marker on my well still shines, still tells the truth, still proves that some things, honor, memory, the sacred debt of water shared, those things don't rust. The sun's down now, time to go inside. But I'll be back tomorrow, same as always, listening to the windmills sing its song of continuity, of water rising from darkness into light, of truth that won't stay buried no matter how deep you dig the lie. By God's mercy, the land remembers, and so do I.